still a way out for us. But we don't have much time.
Do you think you're ready now?
Yeah, I think I'm ready. Welcome to expLOREation, the first video that I'm filming in this new studio, which is why the audio might sound awful. Here, I go into the lore of games and ask where they might be going, what's missing, and where they might have issues. And I'm very excited for today's episode as we at pcgamer are getting ready for the release
of the Dead Space remake. Now, Dead Space 2 is one of my favourite games of all time, and this remake looks to take the gameplay improvements from that game and apply them to the first.
I can't wait to chop up necromorphs again for the first time since the series died. Speaking of Dead Space 3,
as much as I'd like to pretend it didn't exist and not address it for the whole video, it does contain more overarching plot detail than Dead Space 1 and all of the spin-offs combined.
A statement that I'm making with absolutely no factual basis.
To give some IRL background to the original Dead Space game, it originally started out as a System Shock sequel, until Resident Evil 4 came out and EA said, actually just make Resident Evil 4 in space. And here we are now.
At first, it might be easy to wave this video off. How much lore can there be? You go to a ship, you shoot some mutants, go home, repeat that 2 more times until it gets stale, right?
You think there's just the 3 mainline games? Yeah, that actually seems like a good place to start. Here is every single piece of Dead Space media that involves relevant lore, not in release order, but in chronological order in universe.
Dead Space Martyr, Dead Space Catalyst, Dead Space the Comics, the Dead Space Extraction Comics, Dead Space Extraction, Dead Space Downfall, the ARG, No Known Survivors, Dead Space 1, Dead Space Aftermath, Dead Space Salvage, Dead Space Ignition, Dead Space the mobile game, Dead Space 2, Severed, Dead Space 2, Dead Space Liberation, Dead Space 3, and finally, Dead Space 3 Awakened. 17 lore-relevant entries for this series that we will go into today, and then let's talk about what might change in the remake. I'll give a warning when I'll be spoiling the events of Dead Space 1 and beyond, but for now, and that's gonna be a way away, here is a light spoiler about information related to the world of these games. We start an unknown amount of time ago, when a massive entity known as a Brother Moon, which we'll talk about more later, way later, pops out a meteor into space that travels an unknown amount of time to the real start of the Dead Space story 65 million years ago, when dinosaurs ruled the Earth. But not for long. The weather forecast is cloudy with a chance of colossal meteor strikes, resulting in the deaths of almost all life on the planet.
From inside that meteor, however, emerges something hidden inside it. A black marker. The black marker, in fact. This is a giant twisting rock that emits a signal that has horrifying effects on organic creatures. In fact, if we move forward a cool 2 million years ago,
across the Gulf of Space,
on a planet called Tau Volantis, we get the opportunity to see exactly what effect these black markers have. The native inhabitants of this world discover their own black marker,
which made its way to their planet in a meteor, much as the one on Earth did. Upon discovering it, though, they were affected by the signal and became obsessed with the marker, compelled to build replicas known as red markers and spreading them around their world as an energy source. Before they knew it, they triggered a convergence event, the goal of every black marker.
The signal markers produce is electromagnetic and can cause hallucinations and the implanting of information in living organisms. This usually manifests as a unique form of dementia, pushing people to homicidal and suicidal behavior.
Speaking of which, the signal has a much more dramatic effect on dead tissue.
When in range, the cells of dead organisms are rewritten to become necromorph tissue. In other words, dead things turn into a thick soup that sticks to the walls and floors before reforming into the creatures we see in the games. Necromorphs are animated and held together by the marker signal, and will degenerate back into the soup if the signal is cut. As such, they are very hard to kill, leading to the infamous need to cut necromorphs into pieces. The reanimated cells of necromorphs also act effectively as a pathogen, and those infected transform as soon as they die.
The Tau Valantians, the Tau Valantises, the
People of Tau Valantis were unable to stop a convergence event from starting, causing all of the necromorph tissue to start merging and making its way up into the atmosphere, carried up by the electromagnetic signal of the marker, when all the tissue has come together and coalesces into a massive structure, which surrounds itself with rock from the planet to protect its fleshy center. This is the formation of a brand new Brother Moon, the creators of the black markers. The aliens of Tau Valantis had one more trick up their sleeves though. In their last moments, they made and activated a machine that flash froze the planet and its moon, stopping the convergence of their world just before the Brother Moon reached full power. Of course, this also meant that the aliens became extinct too. Tau Valantis was left dead, so consider we just left a black marker on Earth. Lucky for us, thoughtless as we are, Tau Valantis died 2 million years ago, and if we move forward to now, things look pretty good.
What do you mean now?
now, like present day, like 2023.
What are you talking about? Hold it together. Keep going.
Yeah, never mind. Let's just go even further forward to 2215.
Most of what we know during this time period comes from the novel Dead Space Martyr, in which Dredger Corp discovers the black marker in the Yucatan Peninsula, shortly after its existence is revealed to the world by Michael Altman, a name Dead Space fans may already know. But you may not know the whole story. The excavation of the black marker was the staging ground for the first necromorph attack. The only survivor was Altman, who was able to sink the research facility along with the black marker to the bottom of the sea. However, just 1 year later, he was assassinated by government agents who had been exposed to the marker's signal. Using his name and his connection to the marker's revelation to the public, the government formed the Church of Unitology, making Altman an unwilling martyr to what would eventually grow to become the single largest religion in human space.
Moving ahead once again to the end of the 23rd century and the events of the second novel, Dead Space Catalyst, in the 2290s.
The Sovereign Colonies, a predecessor to the EarthGov Colonial Alliance, have successfully reverse-engineered the black marker, resulting in a series of near-perfect replicas called red markers, much like the ones you may remember from poor old Tau Valantis. Their red color comes from material substitutions made during their constructions, and they have a slightly different effect on people from the black marker, including a duo of hallucinations, one good and one evil.
These red markers are believed to be a source of unlimited power and could be the answer to the resource issues that are currently plaguing man.
These markers were sent to various worlds to test them, including one Aegis 7. Once activated, it seemed to be working. Researchers on Aegis 7 also created a tiny microbial life form from the instructions written on the red marker.
Remember that. They also discovered an area of effect of the marker's signal, which they named the Dead Space.
On another planet, Aspera, the marker manipulates researchers into bringing one Istvan Sato to the marker, an individual whose brainwaves perfectly match that of the Asperian red marker. Very soon the marker and Sato start a necromorph outbreak, which starts a chain reaction in all of the red marker sites. Luckily, at all of these sites, enough people managed to escape that a convergence event was not triggered.
However, these incidents did eventually lead to the discovery of the master signal in 2311. Of course, being absolute morons, the humans decided to make 3 more markers and use them to track down a remote planet that appears completely frozen.
The sovereign colonies sent out a mission to our old pal, Tau Volantis, believing this master signal to be the source of the red markers, which could aid in victory in the secession wars that were happening at the time. And if you just started thinking, sorry, what? Will you skip that? Trust me, let's stay on topic with the red markers. If I went into depth with the politics of this universe, we would be here all day. Once on Tau Volantis and after digging into the ice, the researchers found a set of alien remains they called Rosetta. That led to a breakthrough in the understanding of the markers. Right on cue though, the prolonged exposure to the master signal and the 3 markers they brought with them, as well as any markers left on Tau Volantis, start affecting dig team personnel, as well as the teams in orbit. A couple of years later, in 2314, the effects of the marker start really taking hold, and the admiral in charge of the mission attempts to turn off the machine, keeping the planet and the fledgling brother moon orbiting it dormant.
Is stopped, and the team takes this moment to take a step back and evaluate their research. It quickly becomes apparent that Tau Volantis is a Class 5 contact scenario, meaning an extinction-level threat to humanity, and Scenario 5 is put into effect. Scenario 5 aims to eliminate any and all trace of the markers that have been hidden around the system by blacklisting these locations and killing anyone involved with them. The extent of these purges effectively nullified the colony's ability to keep fighting the secession wars. The sovereign colonies collapsed, somewhat willingly, sacrificing themselves for the survival of mankind, and in their place was established EarthGov.
We now travel more than a century into the future in 2446, where the resource wars begin. Earth had been fully plundered for everything it had, and the resource issues that plagued humanity are at an all-time high. Planet cracker ships like the USG Ishimura were made to do exactly what they state on the box: smash a planet apart and take every resource they possibly can. Only 50 years later though, people were already fighting over the last few planets to crack that were listed as allowed targets. Pretty soon, companies like the CEC start to suffer, and after the Warnout disaster of 2497, where 3 supply ships, a planet cracker, and an entire CEC colony are lost to gravity tether failure, this event forces their hand, and the CEC goes off-grid. They send the Ishimura into the blacklisted Aegis cluster, looking for planets to crack. Aegis 7 is found to have extremely valuable mineral deposits, and in 2507, a colony is hastily constructed to prepare the planet for the cracking process. And now we have reached the events leading up to and occurring during the mainline Dead Space games.
Don't want spoilers for the games, including the upcoming remake of the first game. Now is the time to...
Stop! I don't care about any of this. Get to the end. Get to the important part.
What?
I'm sorry, that was unfair of me. Please, take your time.
I don't remember.
Yes, you can. Think. Speak.
You're right. 2058, a few weeks prior to the original Dead Space game, and covered by the events of the Dead Space comics and Dead Space Downfall.
CEC personnel rediscover the red marker on Aegis 7, and as quickly as that happens, the Church of Unitology wants to get their hands on it.
Everyone in the colony is suffering from insomnia and dementia, and management refuses to take the increasing violence seriously.
Just a couple of weeks before Dead Space begins, the red marker is extracted from where the previous colony had sealed it, and it's taken to the Aegis 7 colony. Here, Dead Space extraction begins. This made-for-Wii light gun game has you playing through the collapse of the colony. 50 Unitologists kill themselves in the Union Square mass suicide. Several colony personnel and the extraction team members are killed by an engineer experiencing extreme hallucinations. And then, after all that, the USG Ishimura is finally fully functional above Aegis 7. And of course, the red marker is immediately taken aboard the ship. Shortly after, flights to and from the Ishimura and the planet are blocked, as the CEC personnel aboard the Ishimura begin experiencing insomnia, depression, and dementia.
Even through that, the Ishimura begins its planet crack.
Shortly into the process, interference jams communications between the Ishimura and Aegis 7 as the colony comes under attack by necromorphs. An outbreak started by the bodies of the dead Unitologists. The shuttle port is destroyed by the overflow of necromorphs. 5 of the 6 emergency shuttles on the colony are lost, killing numerous colonists. Once the remaining colonists reach the Ishimura, they find the situation isn't much better. To make things worse, someone brought the man-made necromorph organism from earlier aboard. If you can believe it, this organism multiplies and spreads throughout the ship. Meanwhile, the captain of the ship dies in a botched attempt at an arrest, and all of the emergency shuttles are launched mysteriously with no one aboard. All of a sudden, every deck of the Ishimura is compromised by necromorphs. Some sections remain isolated, but the majority of personnel are dead. And thus ends the events of the Dead Space comics, Dead Space Downfall, and Dead Space Extraction.
Now, finally, however long into the video we are, we can go over the events of the original Dead Space.
So this is your final spoiler warning if you want to go in completely blind. When the comms initially went down on Ishimura, an alert was sent out for a repair, and now the USG Kellion arrives at Aegis 7 to do what they think will be a simple repair job. Of course, they find that everyone is dead and the ship has been taken over by flesh monsters. Slowly, each member of the repair team is killed off, until only an engineer, Isaac Clarke, survives, destroying the red marker and escaping on a shuttle, though he's already been gripped by the marker's dementia. In the animated movie Dead Space Aftermath, we see a team sent to try and retrieve fragments of the red marker. Little do they know, the government doesn't need the pieces of the marker themselves, just people exposed to it. You see, everyone exposed to the marker who develops marker dementia has the chance to have their brain imprinted with a blueprint to make a marker, and this mission is designed to create one of these blueprint carriers at any cost. One of the people on this mission is Nolan Stross, who survives but is captured by EarthGov. At around 3 weeks after the end of Dead Space, Isaac Clarke is found in his escape pod, starving and crazed by marker dementia. Both Stross and Clarke are taken to the Sprawl, a colossal colony on Titan Station. EarthGov does experiments on and manipulates the duo to help them create an all-new marker, dubbed the Site-12 marker. Slowly, Isaac's mind starts blocking out the memories of everything related to his marker knowledge, and he becomes gradually more lucid as time goes on. A while later, a scavenger crew called the Magpies find the remains of the Ishimura in Dead Space salvage, and it's brought to Titan Station to see if they can find any red marker remains on the ship. As soon as this new, massive marker is made, the biggest and least red since the original black marker, necromorphs begin to form from the dead near it. Luckily, the marker is in the government sector of Titan Station, away from the public sector, and as such, the necromorph outbreak can be controlled. Oh, hold on, it looks like the Unitologists have sabotaged the government sector and let the necromorphs into the mines. But that's not so bad. I mean, at least they're not getting from there into the public sector. Oh. Wait, what's this? Oh, it's one of the best mobile tie-in games ever made. Well, Dead Space Mobile's happened now, where Unitologist Carrie Norton opens the crossover tubes, allowing the necromorphs into the public sector. Luckily though, Isaac Clarke has just fully stabilized. Mostly. And is out and about. He makes his way through the facility and eventually destroys the marker that he helped create, escaping with Ellie Langford and off to live a better life as the entirety of Titan Station is destroyed. Oh, also, Dead Space 7 happens. Ellie Langford goes on to team up with John Carver and recovers notes by Dramara Carver into research that was discovered from the Sovereign Colonies' research into the markers. They figure out the origin signal of the markers and, after a few wobbles in their journey, decide to put together a team to hunt down the source of the markers, because that went so well last time. Part of that team is, of course, Isaac Clarke, who they find on Earth's moon Luna, and thus begins the events of Dead Space 3. Remember Tau Volantis? Oh yeah, we're going back. Again, 2 centuries after the original human expedition to the planet. All of the facilities they originally made still work. It's a good thing too, because the team needs it to fit in all of the Unitologists that have followed them to the planet, believing it would be the marker's homeworld. they make their way into an abandoned alien city and try to stop the Unitologists from deactivating the machine, which is still the only thing stopping the Brother Moon from reaching its full power. After a confrontation on top of the machine, the Brother Moon is awakened and attempts to get to the finality of its power. Isaac, Clarke, and Carver manage to destroy it before it does, though. That again, they kill a moon, and they're sent plummeting down towards the planet, ready to meet their deaths. Close curtains on Dead Space 3, but that's not the end of the story. The oft-overlooked Dead Space 3 DLC, Awakened, begins.
This was in that thankfully brief time period where EA were making endings to games DLC content, so you had to pay extra to actually finish the game.
Clarke and Carver wake up on the surface of the planet after having mysteriously survived the fall from space. They go after the remaining Unitologists and board the CMS Terra Nova, making their way back to Earth, hopefully before the Brethren Moons can reach it and start a convergence event on the human homeworld. The Brother Moon from Tau Volantis has other ideas, however, and distracts them by pitting them against each other, and they miss their chance to warn Earth. When they finally make it back to Earth, they find it's already under attack by the Brethren Moons. They smash into one of the moons, and sadly, that's where the story ends. But do you remember way back at the start of this when I asked you to remember those Brethren Moons? Well, I just want to talk about them a little bit more. These blood moons, as mentioned previously, are the end result of a convergence event and the final goal of black markers. A Brother Moon is the final form in the Necromorph life cycle, and as such acts as the main antagonist of the entire franchise. Once a moon is formed, it seeks out more life to consume and add to its mass, eventually joining up with the other Brother Moons, together known as the Brethren Moons, which is where the Dead Space franchise crosses into pure, classic style cosmic horror. The moons reproduce by creating black markers which land on suitable host worlds and force its inhabitants to create a Brother Moon. They want to do it. It's never made clear if the moons choose planets that are going to have organic life, or if they start the process of organic life forming in the first place. Markers then fall dormant until a species on that planet reaches a certain level of technological advancement. Of course, we know where things go from there. After the Necromorph infestation has claimed enough of the planet's population, the accumulated markers the host species were forced to make start the convergence event. Once the moon has absorbed the entire biosphere of the host planet, it moves on to the next and keeps feeding, not needing to use markers now, just wreaking destruction planet-wide everywhere it goes. Where it really hits a cosmic scale with its horror, though, is with Earl Serrano, who speculated that all life between wherever the origin of the Brethren Moons is and humanity's home system had already been extinguished by the moons, creating a non-standard answer to the Fermi paradox. Humanity's never been contacted by aliens. Not because they didn't exist, but because the most destructive predator in the universe has absorbed most, if not all, life in the galaxy.
Now that's what I call dead space.
But how do you do it?
What?
How do you build a marker?
A black marker? Only Brother Moons can create black markers, but for a red marker, I guess you'd have to...
It's okay. It's fine. Take your time. We can wait until you're ready.
Brace yourselves! He's gonna smash us into the hull!
Isaac, it's me. It's all falling apart here.
Hey, Isaac. You coming? Where is everybody? Up there! No!
This transformation, it's remarkable. Don't you want to be reunited with the people you lost?
How
homecoming will be truly divine.
There's still a way out for us. But we don't have much time.
Do you think you're ready now?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm ready. Welcome to expLOREation, the first video that I'm filming in this new studio, which is why the audio might sound awful.
But that's not all. Here on expLOREation, we like to go a little further and talk about what's missing and what the future might hold. There are all sorts of inconsistencies in the lore, mostly thanks to so many writers contributing to it over the years, but some pervasive ones, like what actually decides which of those afflicted with Mark Dementia will become blueprint carriers, tend to stick out. Overall though, there is a clear line you can draw through the world from the beginning to the end. Learning the lore of the Dead Space franchise really highlights how conceptually frightening it is. You face cosmic horrors, and no one ever survives, even going as far as coming to an end with the entire human race being wiped out. Hell, at the end of Dead Space Extraction, it implies that the people the necromorphs used to be are still in there, still conscious and sapient, and can see and experience everything they do and that happens to them with no control over their new bodies. One thing I hope they do more as the series gets remade is go deeper into the thematic implications of the second and third games. The second game is already a great look at depression caused by trauma and PTSD in general, but it's largely superficial, and I feel with just some script changes, it could really make for some juicy content. Furthermore, I think they should make more of a point of how destructive the nature of planet cracking is. Are all these planets just barren? Do they even check? How many species have humans killed just to survive? How different are the Brethren moons from the humans? They go from planet to planet, destroying them and taking all their resources, but they need to do it, otherwise they'll die out. Does that make it right though? There's some cool mirroring and yin-yang type stuff you could do here, but I guess we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. For Dead Space, of course, the cliffhanger ending that Awakened ended with will never be resolved, but hey, it fits into the cosmic horror convention of the end being inescapable. Nevertheless, much like the framing device for the previous section of this video, this upcoming new entry will reset us back all the way to the first game. One thing I wonder is, will they keep the events leading up to this point the same, and will things still play out the same way? They've already shown that the gameplay is going to change and that Isaac speaks in this version. Who knows what else they may have changed? Maybe we get to see a closer look into things we already know, or maybe with the gift of foresight in hindsight, they can hint towards things like the Brethren moons earlier on in the story. Perhaps, but we will have to wait and see, and we haven't got long to wait either. If I missed anything, or if you have any ideas about what the remake might change about the Dead Space lore, please feel free to comment below. And while you're down there, please feel free to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more content like this.